It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! And I'm talking quietly because I'm continuing to try to work out these audio issues that have only materialized since a Windows 10 update that has not gone so well for me. This was an issue I had with audio recording in Windows 10 when I first got Windows 10. It wasn't an issue after a previous update. It's back to being an issue again. The problem is that there is no way to turn down the sensitivity on external USB microphones. There's no setting on the mic. There's no setting in the computer. And so the problem with the videos the last couple days is that things have been coming in hot and not mixing down. And this is the continued frustration with Windows 10. Of course, I have to use Windows 10 because I have to play games on Windows 10. So I am stuck. What do I do about this? Just keep trying. So we're going to try to keep kind of an easy listening tone of voice. You're listening to KTLZ, the newest hits in smooth. You know, we're gonna stay in that sort of range today, and that might not be a bad thing. It might not be a bad thing because I am at a loss to deal with some of the feedback for the week in a productive way for a few reasons. One of which is, how do I put this? I got a good piece of advice from somebody who does, professional advertising, professional marketing, things like that, about messaging and feedback and everything like that. And the advice essentially was, don't take on critics. If there is an issue with delivery, if there was an issue with delivery. I'm not going to say tone. People being angry is not a bad thing. But if someone is name calling, if someone is lying, if someone is doing that, address that. But don't address your critics because people want to back winners. Now, this is not advice from an ethical perspective. This is simply optics marketing, and it's good advice. This guy is very smart and very successful. And I thought I was doing that. But I have been treating haters like critics, and I realize that now. And so I'm going to try to do things a little bit differently, but it's going to take time. I like to treat people at face value. If someone seems passionate about something, I like to reward that. I don't expect that people are going to approach something perfectly. And sometimes it's really difficult to distinguish whether someone is just really upset or, triggered, as people like to mock. And I don't like mocking that. I don't like making fun of triggers. Some people, everybody, if you are a human being, there are things that just set you off emotionally. And if you're denying this, you're lying. Everybody has something they are sensitive to and they just don't like. And you guys know my theory of the internet is that the internet tells us we need to hide these things that bother us, which I have found just makes you more sensitive and reactive to them. If you don't feel like you can say, I don't like that, then by the time you finally speak up for yourself, you're so far down the road in terms of being upset about something. It all comes out in a rush. And I see too many people like that. And I empathize with these people. I know what it's like to be in that place. And I don't want to shut people out, but there have been too many people who are able to twist what I'm doing for various reasons. And I don't think all of them intend to. I think that in the current political climate, people are being rewarded for treating other people like the enemy. Democracy and freedom are very messy, and they're loud. But they don't have to be mean or predatory. And that comes down to this idea of personal accountability, that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And I'm extremely concerned about this internet rule that it is somehow anti-intellectual to be concerned about another person's feelings. Because being upset doesn't make you right. But that doesn't mean it's not valid to be upset. Sometimes people need time to understand why they are as upset as they are. And that's valid. And I think there's been a lot of that in this election. A lot of people are having very strong emotional responses to things, and they're not entirely sure why to later. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of that in the comments. And I've been seeing a lot of that in the comments this week. And this is where I was getting to in this discussion. This is a Feedback Friday. Don't worry. This isn't a Mountain Monday. There were a lot of comments about violence in video games in response to the Laurie Birdall video, the interview on Wednesday. And I don't even know how to unpack those, because the interview wasn't about violence in video games. It was about primarily sexualization of children in the context of bullying and the rhetoric of the current presidential campaign, notably Donald Trump. That was how the interview was pitched to me. I got a press release about that, and it came out after the whole Alicia Machado thing, and they're promoting this book about how to protect your kids from online predators, and how this sort of thing in public can affect opinions and make kids more vulnerable to coercion or manipulation. So I don't even know where the comments about violence in video games came from. And people were very angry at me for not challenging Dr. Birdall about violence in video games. And I don't even know how to address that, because that wasn't the topic. Like, look, when you're interviewing someone and they say something, and she said a lot of things I found very challenging. It was a layered discussion, and while it was going on, she'd say things, and I have this sort of, and people said, "You're sitting there nodding." What was going on in my head was, oh, okay, she means in context to this other thing, because her approach is multi-layered. First of all, and she did make this very clear, that she was not referring to sexualization of adults. Her concern is that kids are being sexualized as old as the age of 3, and that was a shocking thing for me. And so she was talking about an age group from about 3 years old to 16 years old. And she said in the interview as well that you know, she wouldn't let her kids date before the age of 16, because if kids are dating, you have to assume they're having sex. And so she's talking about premature sexualization. And the reason I had her define what she meant at the beginning of the interview is because her use of the term sexualization and my use of the term sexualization are different. Her definition of the term sexualization is my concept of over-sexualization or hyper-sexualization. And there is a there is a violent component to sexualization in our media. Maybe that's where the cross happened. But I'm very confused because she didn't say hide your kids away from the world. She didn't say that violent content makes people violent. And we know that violent content does have a detrimental effect on kids. It scares them. It can traumatize them. This is known. And so I don't quite know where the disagreement should have been here. I don't know why anybody ever thought I was saying it was fine to give violent video games to 9-year-olds. I'm confused here, and that can't be what people meant. I can say an interview cannot hurt you as much as I want, but people clearly got hurt. People clearly got upset by this. The problem is the nature of the comments did not make it clear what was so upsetting. People tend to spew facts because, and my theory is that because the internet tells you nobody cares about your feelings, people try to communicate about feelings by talking about facts. And then I found people get very upset when you argue those facts with them because they're code for feelings, and so they feel invalidated when you disagree with them. If something is upsetting, I want to know. But I can't know that's what the issue is if you start accusing me of things I just didn't do. Like, I'm sorry, guys, the point of that interview was not violence in video games. She's not a video game expert. I was actually surprised talking to her off camera how good her knowledge was about the research surrounding video games. But that's not saying that there's anything wrong with the games. That's saying parents have to parent. And that was my takeaway from what she said. And, you know, unfortunately, I get it, guys, that a lot of people in gaming do not have the best track record when it comes to parents. I certainly don't. You know, the whole thing about monitoring your children's activity. That was tough for me to listen to because the only happy parts of my childhood were things that happened when my parents weren't watching everything that I did because they didn't understand me. But I realized that in the context of what she was saying, like she also talked about don't ban things from your kids, contextualize it, talk to them, make it an ongoing dialogue. So she was actually advocating for the things I would have really wanted from my parents. And because I didn't get them, I detached from them. Now, I know from my own experiences, doing that too young does lead to trust issues. If you can't trust your parents as a young person, who can you trust? And I think there's a lot of people in gaming who are still working through that. The pain is real, the fear is real, and trust me, they don't want to feel that way. No one wants to feel scared. And I just feel like we're talking about safe spaces versus war zones on the internet, and I don't think that's working. I think that an alternative to a safe space is an open space. And let me unpack that and what I'm trying to do with this channel and the work that I do. A safe space is just, oh, you can come here and rant and say things that are illogical and maybe not make sense and maybe say things that, you know, like kill all men or kill all white people and things like that and blah, 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 blah. I don't think that's healthy. There's been no indication that, you know, this verbal equivalent of primal scream therapy really helps everyone. We should not be feeding into the idea that you want to kill anyone. There's an outlet in art for that. There's an outlet to discuss that in private therapy or even maybe group therapy, but it has to be supervised. It can't be, an entire university campus is considered a quote unquote safe space where it's okay to talk about killing your oppressor. That is just not healthy. What I think we need is open spaces where they're places that become much more honest about both the emotional and intellectual elements of difficult topics and how those interplay. Because intellect without wisdom doesn't create progress. It creates a whole bunch of data that no one can really sort through. It's okay, well, this means this, but how do we apply this in a compassionate manner? And I don't think that the answer is... It's tough. I'm trying to figure out how to put this. Because I do think that challenging speakers are important to the experience, but there are some people that, as much as I recognize they have the right to speak, I recognize they have the right to hold views I consider extremely unhealthy, but I should not be forced to listen to them, and they should be optional talks that aren't a part of course curriculum. And I think that there needs to be a certain equal time and equal exposure thing in not just higher education, but media, anything that's informing the public. There needs to be, if you have a men's rights type speak one week and you have a radical feminist speak the next week, and then you allow some moderates to come in as well, I think that's fair. And if all this is optional and nobody's forced to consume any of this, well, this is just, if you're interested, come see it. It's like anything else. But that doesn't seem to be what happens. It seems like people pick their causes to advocate from instead of offering the information in a neutral place and letting the audience decide. They go, well, we're going to take this kind of challenging speaker and we're going to invite them, and we're not going to invite this other type of speaker. And that's when you start getting into problems, because that definitely does seem like the university playing intellectual favorites. And there are some people who do preach hate. I remember there was an issue quite a while back where a speaker at the U of T held the opinion that some Jews, not all Jews, but some Jews, are lizard people from Mars. And this is just, no. Universities should not be open doors for conspiracy theories. There's absolutely zero evidence to support that. And that you can't, unless it's a course on fairy tales, you can't have speakers coming in and telling people fairy tales in the guise of intellectual thought. Like, there has to be a baseline. Open spaces are not an opportunity for people to come in and peddle disinformation. But that's not the same as somebody who may have something challenging to say. This is the divider that the age of the internet has not yet found the level on. That people are rewarded for saying outrageous things and getting in front of a camera and ranting. And just basically confirming for people all the things that they feel somewhat bad for thinking. And I think people spend too much time feeling bad in the modern world. I really do. I see that in the comments. I see that in, every time somebody I know is a smart person comes out with something that is absolutely anti-intellectual, usually it's a massive assumption. A Jill Stein supporter claimed they were quitting, they were unsubscribing, they were not going to watch me anymore because I had not sufficiently improved in their mind when it came to my comments about Hillary Clinton. And they could only assume that I think just the way she does accordingly. And that's not accurate. I just, it's so weird because this was in response to a video where I said that Hillary Clinton dressed like Chairman Mao as the ghost of Christmas past, which I worried about saying because it's, poking fun at her clothes, but it is not saying they were unattractive clothes. It was just, it's vaguely communist. Do you really want to be wearing that? And, the whole issue with poking fun of a female politician's clothes is that the accusation is that it's not done to men as much, but we're past that thanks to people like Jimmy Kimmel, who, made fun of Rob Ford for dressing like a magician. Hillary Clinton's clothing choices have been so deliberate that I think it's fair to point them out. I've actually said there's two characters. My husband laughs at this all the time. There's Grandma Pajamas Hillary, and then there's Power Pantsuits Hillary. And it's very deliberate what's worn there. And this is fair to point out. It's not a question of whether something is attractive or not. It's indicating that there is these are deliberate clothing choices, and it's fair to talk about what those mean. And this is an example of something where the general feminist consensus is you're never supposed to comment on a woman's wardrobe ever because it's sexist. And that just, I find too restrictive. If it's not a question of appeal, if it's not a question of saying she looks nice, she doesn't look nice. It was a very nice suit. It was quality material and was likely very expensive. That's not the point. The point is it was an interesting choice, in the, especially since she threw way down on Planned Parenthood, way down on, a pro-choice stance. All these things she's trying to show right now because of the, the smoke from the WikiLeaks that no, she is a friend of the left. And so I found that interesting, and I don't think it's sexist to point this out, because you got to be careful that you're not playing into benevolent sexism. And the reason I focus so much on benevolent sexism is because it's something that people really don't understand yet. And I recognize there's going to be a lot of anger based on that. People really don't understand, and I understand there's a thing of, oh God, I got to rearrange my thinking again. There's a whole new list of things I can't say. I understand the frustration there, and I'm really trying to pull it away from, here's a list of things you can say, here's a list of things you can't say, because I know that's frustrating too. So, the focus needs to pivot from, the 6 words you can't say on internets, for lack of a better term, onto let's look at the roots of these comments. Let's actually examine them for what they are, and that takes bravery, and that takes civility, that takes a certain collective agreement that you're not going to jump all over someone for making a mistake. Explaining things involves context for things, and a lot of people lecture on context, but they don't actually recognize that context is a big thing. And a lot of the ways we communicate are so brief that they are inherently robbed of context by medium, and because you can't get to it all. And I am not giving up on there being a way. There seems to be enough people who genuinely want to know, who genuinely want to be informed. And they don't want to sound like, and they don't want to be an extremist from one side or the other. They just don't know what the truth really is. And it seems like there's this false perception that the truth is going to come all from one side or all from the other side. And that's not the way it works. It works from, okay, this is a good idea here, but this is a valid concern from this other faction that needs to be addressed as we implement this otherwise practical, let's try it program. And the problem is we can't do that right now because disagreements mean you think the other people are evil. And it shouldn't be that way. There's been a lot of calls for an overhaul of leadership. But what it seems to me is happening is the people that are setting themselves up to be replacements for the existing, powers that be are not offering a different internal structure. They're offering a different coat of paint. They're saying different things, but the way they are communicating is the same. And I've realized, I know I'm repeating myself here, but I've realized how difficult some of these things are to explain. This idea of dog whistle politics and this idea of dog whistles, it's so insidious. It's using cultural diversity as a weapon. And, finding the most effective words, not the right words, but the most effective words is an ongoing thing. And there are some things I've said, I forget which one, there was some, I'm gonna have to look it up again, but it was the word spaz. Apparently that's a slur in the UK regarding people who have seizures. So I've had to try to not say that. I adopted don't freak out so that I don't say don't spaz, because it offends people in certain parts of the world. Little things like being aware if you're speaking and you're sitting not to cross your legs because you may expose the bottom of your shoe, and that is offensive to people from certain cultures. This seems completely arbitrary to us, but it matters to them. And if you actually think about symbols, the middle finger, why is that offensive? I don't know. We just know what someone means when they do that. And so I think it's, it's interesting to me because, and this is sort of the question that I'm going to end on for you guys. It ties into this because I had a direct message conversation with someone on Twitter who was trying to be very helpful and had a suggestion. And it was basically that I should make a video defining what certain terms mean to me. And because this person came to me with very clearly very good intentions, and they're offering an attempt to help instead of just insulting me or insulting other people, or how could you do that, or I'm done with you, or unsubscribe. And I want to take this person seriously, and I want to try to develop this idea. But I'm not sure it's quite lined up yet, and I want to see if we can solve this together. And this is sort of the idea of open spaces. Like, let's throw this idea out there and try to add to it, try to build to it, instead of saying why it's wrong. How can we make this better? So the suggestion, and I see merit in this, is do a video defining terminologies as I use them. Terms like patriarchy, terms like privilege, terms like, things like that, trigger terminologies. Even the term feminism needs to be defined for some people, because some people are adamant that feminists want to make women superior instead of, the way I use the term, which is it's the goal of achieving equality, true equality, with an emphasis on how imbalances affect gender, not just women, but also the feminine, the state of femininity, and how femininity tends to be a pejorative, that, men are, you play like a girl, oh, you're crying like a girl, things like that. Men are insulted by being compared to women. And it's true that, women are insulted for being mannish, but let's face it, in society right now, there is more acceptance of women who adopt traditionally masculine characteristics than men who adopt traditionally feminine characteristics. I mean, that's just, there aren't very many guys wearing high-heeled shoes and dresses, but, people like Ellen and Rachel Maddow and people like that have made sort of the short hair and running shoes their thing. And who determined short hair and running shoes were a guy thing? Well, somebody did, right? And this is the whole discussion. But my concern, my apprehension, and I caught myself shutting this guy down too soon, and I do apologize for that, but my apprehension with this, I mean, I think it's a solid foundation. It's a good idea. But my concern about the execution of it is twofold. One, there are some people who are just going to reject any definition I provide as not the real definition. I have had this happen. I've said, this is what feminism is to me. This is how I use it. This is what patriarchy means to me. But then people say, no, that's not what patriarchy means to this person. I don't want to get mired in that fight. I want to move forward. There are some people who will never be convinced. The other concern I have is that there is an ongoing problem here where people find one line and they make a whole lot of hay about that line because they take it out of the greater context and use it as a weapon. And I am concerned that an exercise that is done with the best of intentions and an exercise to seek clarity will just create ammunition to create more smoke. But I think there's still merit in the idea. And this is where I'm stuck. So this is my question to you guys. How do you think this concept can be shaped so that it does what it's intended to do, which is, create clarity and make terms that mean different things to different people more useful for the purpose of this discussion, without the potential risks overriding the potential positives? So that is my question. That is what I'm curious about this week. I know, not an easy one. And this is why I'm asking for help here. This is why I'm curious about what other people think about this, because, and I'm not trying to put this person on the spot. I apologize. I've spent, alone time, for lack of a better term, with this idea as far as I can really take it, and I'm stuck. And so I'm asking for, because I don't just want to not do it because I don't know what to do with it. And you guys have been really useful. You guys have been really helpful in the past about things like, the titles on gaming videos and things like that. We've worked together very well in that regard. And I want this to be sort of, I want this be a community. I don't want this to just be about me. I want this to be an us. You know, I want to talk about things you guys are interested in, and I want to approach things in a way that everybody can kind of be on the same page. At least there being some overlap on. And so that's, you know, that's why I do this Feedback Friday. This is, you know, the kind of the point. But I do want this to be a part of something bigger. And I do want you guys to feel like you are a part of a place within the gaming community and dealing with topics that are interesting to gamers, where you feel respected, where you feel included, and where you feel you matter, no matter what your identifiers are. I want to rise above identity politics, because I just feel like that keeps people in holes. And that doesn't mean that, you know, your identity doesn't matter. Of course it matters. It's naive to say it doesn't. But I don't want people to be afraid to speak here. And so I'm really hoping we can make this work. Okay, so have a good weekend. Looking forward to your feedback on that point, and I will keep trying to get this bloody audio issue fixed. I think the solution is going to be an external mixer, which I cannot afford right now. And this is the point where most people would talk about fundraising and Patreon, and I am still not very good about that. So I'm going to suck out of that right now, because I am just not in a place to take crap for that. So have a good weekend, and see you guys on Monday.